Welcome one and welcome all. We're here live tonight on BerryFlow Upstream number 84 on January 24th, 2016. Here with Editor-in-Chief of Crackberry, Blaze, as well Alex Bass of Cyberbytes Inc. and my main man, Chad Mansour. How are you doing, y'all?
Good.
Doing good.
Good.
Good to have you all on, Alex. I hope you start feeling better soon, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Alex is suffering from some sickness.
It happens.
He's sick of not talking about BlackBerry, so
Yeah.
we're here to cure his ailment, right? Probably not it, but we have an interesting little topic list today of a couple of different things that happened across this past week. I want to just touch base with you guys on how the weather is where you are. Alex, I know you're
man.
kind of like almost in Canada, and you're probably the closest one to Canada that's here right now. How's the weather for you?
Yeah, I mean, there was literally just a video released by this guy, Casey Neistat, and he was snowboarding and skiing in New York City because they closed down all the roads and everything in New York City, I think, yesterday. And it literally, he uploaded it at midnight, and by like 4 a.m., it had 500,000 views, and it's going viral. I haven't checked it yet today, but it's probably like just destroyed right now. So if you want to see what it's like in New York, check out that video. Not as bad in Buffalo, but it's similar.
I was joking around yesterday and I tweeted out a picture. I was like, live photo from New York, and it was just a white photo.
Yeah.
You put it together in Photoshop, and it was just white.
Took him a whopping 2 seconds to get that slapped together, which is kind of ironic when you think about it. Like, we have global warming, but then like the snows are even worse, and it's getting colder, and so many like climate issues that are going on right now. It's pretty wild. I've been watching too many documentaries, if you guys can't tell. Let's get started on our topic list. We just have a few things to go through today. First thing I want to touch base on is the Department of Veteran Affairs selecting BlackBerry's AtHoc for their crisis communication. Just kind of an interesting bit of news, right? It's a multi-year deal, which is pretty interesting. Potentially maybe some growth there. Looking at about $20 million for that contract. That's a pretty good number for BlackBerry to be pulling in through one of their subsidiaries, right? What do you guys think of the news, and what do you think it means for AtHoc? I mean, we've seen a lot of AtHoc news, and I don't know if it's they've got better press releases and more of them, and the news we just happen to be picking them up, or whether this company is really bringing in traction and some revenues for BlackBerry. What are some of your thoughts, guys?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. We're actually paying attention to AtHoc now because if you look at the AtHoc website, they issued a bunch of press releases. It's kind of funny because we talk about their improvement on press releases and stuff like that, but they actually kind of screwed this one up. They wrote up a blog post about it a few days ahead of the actual like BlackBerry press release, and they published it, and then they took it down. It disappeared, and you couldn't actually reference it anymore, so you couldn't see the information from there. But then the actual press release came a few days later, so there must have been something in the blog post that wasn't, like quote unquote finalized or something. Anyways, that's aside from the fact. It was just kind of really interesting that the news came out ahead of time. They pulled back on it, and then they issued the actual press release, which is good. Like. Because they should be putting out press releases when it comes to this stuff, and toting the ability that they actually have. A lot of times, the deals are deals that are made that can't actually be publicized with the government and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where I'm glad to actually see it, glad to see the press release for it, and 20 some odd $million isn't anything to sneeze at.
Yeah, it got me thinking though at the same time where it's like $25 million is a lot of money, but like on the scale of the level of that these companies are at, it's like almost not a lot of money. But it's a great thing, obviously. But it's just like thinking about how like it's tough to even envision how big $1 billion really is when you kind of hear 25 million. It's really not that much of a billion if they're trying, depending on what they're trying to make in a year. But obviously, it's great for them to start making some money from these acquisitions and. I don't know. It's always good to see them bring a new. I think bringing in a new deal is probably one of the most difficult things to do. Keeping a customer is I think like 10 times easier than obtaining a new one. So, whenever they get a new one, good for them. That's great.
Yeah, I'm just impressed because honestly, based off the traction we're looking to see on kind of the software side of the business, that's actually a decent dent for BlackBerry, right?
Yeah,
In
that's
the grand
true.
scheme of things, it may not be as much as a lot of these other companies are making, but I mean, if you looked at just their free positive cash flow in the start of fiscal
Yeah,
2016, we're looking at $100 million, right?
true.
So,
That's a good
so
point.
for them to be pulling in that much money is actually pretty substantial. So it is good news
Yeah,
to be seeing. And again, it's now part of this kind of broader umbrella of what represents BlackBerry these days, right? Where it's so much more beyond the handset. And it's really interesting if you kind of think about it. And I wanted to discuss this with you guys. If you look at like where BlackBerry's customers actually are, and by volume, it's kind of interesting to see kind of where they're spending their time, right? And we're seeing that percolate through things like BlackBerry 10 and the handset business in general, right? And obviously the software focus. But they have a lot more users on the software side of their business than they do in some of their more kind of brick and mortar type physical assets. So it is kind of interesting to see how they're going to continue to leverage, especially with all the IP, right? All this untapped IP that we really still haven't seen monetized that's potentially worth $1 to $2 billion on its own, right? So what do you think is kind of the move? Do you think more acquisitions along the lines of AtHoc are what are going to save this company long term? Or is it innovating on the platforms that they're buying? So I guess that's my question to you guys. Do you think it has to be a little bit of both, or are they really going to try to take this strategy kind of one way?
It kind of has to be a little bit of both. I mean, you know, BlackBerry sort of kind of has a history of acquiring companies and then not really doing anything with them. But it seems as though that they're essentially getting better at letting these companies do what they do good, and basically just leaving it at that. Like AtHoc hasn't necessarily been fully integrated into, you know, the quote unquote BlackBerry ecosystem does, but it's running and it's still making the money. It's still bringing in revenue. I just totally screwed that up because I read something Alex or James put in the chat.
yeah. Don't pin that on me.
Yeah, don't blame Alex for something he didn't do.
You look at your laugh, Alex.
Yeah, but I mean, it basically comes down to like they're letting the companies do what they are already doing rather than trying to integrate them or turn them into something else. Like, you know, they had mobile data infrastructure previously. They basically integrated that so that it saved bandwidth and stuff like that. But what's that acquisition doing today? Not necessarily anything, because of the fact that, you know, BBOS devices are sort of in the decline at this point. They're not using it on BlackBerry 10, and they're certainly not using it to any great capacity through Android. So kind of just there. But you know, they're gonna go ahead and essentially acquire companies that are you know, suited to be able to go ahead and make the money and you know, things that basically help the company on the software side. So I mean, John Chen hasn't exactly been very coy about it. He's going to go ahead and acquire companies that basically fit BlackBerry's profile and that can essentially help them out in the long run. He's been pretty straight up about that, and that's, you know, any profit that they make, that's where it has been going thus far. They go out and they acquire good, they go out and they acquire AtHoc, so on and so forth, right? So yeah, it definitely has to be a good combination of both at this point, and I think they're finally realizing what they have to do in terms of those acquisitions rather than letting them languish in the background. Like, you know, think about Tat didn't necessarily do a ton of stuff for BlackBerry in the long term, but
in the short term, really, right? Like 3 years is not a long time either.
Yeah, exactly.
Technology.
You could arguably say that was one of the acquisitions that they didn't necessarily make a lot of use out of, but it cost them quite a bit to be able to go ahead and acquire them. But I think that's what John Chen has essentially brought into the foray is the ability to actually go ahead and make use of these acquisitions rather than, you know, them just spending money and basically letting them languish in the background. I mean, Ted, how do you look at it?
Well, I completely agree, and what I really like to see is what they're actually acquiring all these companies at a reasonable price. They're not overly spending, and when they're acquiring them, which is great, in my opinion. Look at what was good, and they picked them up at really low price, and what they were able to accomplish with by taking over that company or a division of. Oh, look at that. That's what I'm talking. Good job, James.
No, there's just not a lot left. I didn't want to pour it in the glass, but you know, that's a very good point. At them picking up good for, like, I think it was like a quarter of their initial valuation, like a couple months ahead, where they actually turned down an offer that was like for double what BlackBerry ended up scooping it for. So super good point that they are being very prudent with these types of investments. Blaze was kind of touching on it a little bit with some of their early acquisitions. A lot of the stuff BlackBerry was absorbing back then was to bolster the single core platform, which was back then BBOS, right, and a lot of the infrastructure around that. And as we transitioned into BlackBerry 10, we saw a lot of acquisitions. JCut, which brought StoryMaker. Working with Scalado to build TimeShift. A lot of the partnerships and deals that they were doing were really focused again on bolstering the core platform, building BlackBerry 10 to what it is, and also other additives, obviously, to the QNX side of that whole equation. So it is really interesting. Now we're seeing BlackBerry investing, again, on that software type stuff. And that's interesting because it gives BlackBerry more legs to stand on a wider plane, right? So they can talk to more and bigger audiences than just that one core platform, that one core product and service. So it really diversifies BlackBerry, and as Blaze said, it gives them longevity outside the short term to continue doing and building on what their core competencies are, really plugging in the gaps and holes where they don't necessarily have a solution, right? SecuSmart, Movertu, etc. So really cool to see, and it's an interesting win for AtHoc, and I'm glad it's now a win for BlackBerry as well. Let's move on to another topic that we have here, specifically about Priv, scheduled to make its debut in 4 days in India. This has been one of BlackBerry's biggest regions for them for quite some time, even though it's slightly eroded to obviously the Android devices hitting that low end really, really well. The launch event is going to be Thursday over in India, and Priv is scheduled to actually make its full debut. What do you guys think about this particular market? Do you think we may see some regional marketing done to kind of enhance the drop-in of the device, because it's been really, really well anticipated, but also it's very expensive. So, like, what kind of prices are we going to see? And is it a realistic thing that a lot of Indian users are actually going to migrate to when there's so many other options?
Man, I think that you're going to be in a new ballgame at this point. The fact that you're going to somewhere where there are very cheap Android devices, and there's even cheap BlackBerry 10 devices. The Priv is fairly expensive right now, so I don't know. It's a tough scenario to be in. You'd hope it'd sell well, but I don't know how much faith I have in that exactly. But there are a lot of people who care a lot about BlackBerry in that market, definitely. So I think that it will get a lot of, just like the US has, that has some hardcore BlackBerry users, and they snatch that up, day one. I think there are going to be a lot of people there doing that as well. I just don't know if it's going to really, start replacing everyone who's using a BlackBerry 10 device or anything like that.
And that's kind of what I worry about a little bit, right? Like, how much traction can a device that is so high-end, especially when, there's other high-end devices out there. So it is really interesting that they are coming a little bit late into the Indian game specifically, but I think they're going to have probably better distribution and a better wrap as to what their numbers are and how that device is actually going to do for them. So it will be interesting to see what kind of launch event happens and if they push any other kind of marketing material. Chad, do you have a partner in crime over there?
Yes, my daughter decided to join. Say hi, Michaela.
She's like, nope.
Nope.
I'll sit here, but I'm not saying anything.
Have you noticed her gravitating toward any of your BlackBerry devices that you've had? I mean, is the slider more interesting than the Passport was, or anything else?
She was kind of distracted by the keyboard whenever I slide it out. She's like, ooh, what's that? And she keeps on asking, what happened to your other phone? She liked my other phone.
Oh.
Bye-bye Passport.
That's a true BlackBerry 10 fan right there.
Yes. She actually still uses my playbook. So.
I actually am inheriting a playbook that we're trying to fix because it's all sorts of messed up, and so that's cool that she's getting to use early BlackBerry technology while she's still early. Awesome. So next on our list here, I wanted to talk a little bit about T-Mobile. This is something that's going to be big for definitely the North American market specifically. Coming in at $720, launching in 2 days. So we'll see that happening on Tuesday. What do you guys think about T-Mobile specifically launching Priv at the time they're doing it, following AT&T's quote-unquote exclusive for 60 days? Do you think, now that they're getting more of these North American carriers on board, that it's really going to be able to push and drive this device? I think a lot of people need to think back to the last time BlackBerry had a launch on all major North American carriers, and that's That's talking like 9900 era, you know, because D10 didn't even hit all the North American carriers. Sprint waited for the Q10, so it's like this is the first time in a while BlackBerry's gotten this, you know, such a wide distribution on their devices.
Yeah.
So talk about T-Mobile and tell us what you think of this price in comparison to what, you know, we're obviously experiencing on AT&T.
I just think, the people who, I think at this point, the only people who are going to buy it are people who have bought it regardless. They want the keyboard. They're really not going to be competing in the spec market whatsoever because, like, I think within the next couple months we're going to start seeing the new, 820 processor drop and everything and a bunch of new phones and everything coming out. I don't think it's the best time necessarily to be buying a brand new phone, and especially if you're getting in a 2-year commitment or whatever you're doing, or like a trade-up program or something. I really think this is just going to be geared towards the people who are BlackBerry 10 users. For instance, when I went and bought my Priv, there was a lady there who currently used the Passport, and she wanted to buy the Priv. Like, there are people, I think those are the kind of people that will get it, but as for the general market, I think it's a little late, and that worries me quite a bit, especially, we still haven't even, Verizon hasn't come out yet either.
Which I'm kind of shocked that T-Mobile beat
Yeah.
Verizon. I was
Yeah.
actually impressed that that was announced. I would have anticipated Verizon jumping in on there and releasing a day or two or something.
Especially with Verizon's, long history of loving Android devices. So
That too.
I don't know, I think I kind of agree with Alex that, maybe, initially the first people through the doors to be able to go ahead and pick it up from T-Mobile are essentially, those hardcore audience who are going to pick it up no matter what. But at the same time, I think just having it on another North American carrier is a benefit because it helps spread the word of the device's existence in itself. Like, because at this point, as we all know, some people still believe that BlackBerry is running BlackBerry OS devices. Never mind BlackBerry 10, right? It kind of goes back to that marketing thing. I'm kind of hoping that BlackBerry or T-Mobile does essentially their own little bit of marketing with it, which we have.
Yeah.
We've kind of seen a little bit of it thus far because when you have the CEO of T-Mobile tweeting out that he's getting a new BlackBerry device, that may not necessarily count as marketing, but it works as marketing.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The back and forth between him and Chen on Twitter has sort of helped the scenario, and the fact that the T-Mobile Twitter account was excited to be able to go ahead and announce that the device is actually coming, that helps, goes a long way. Maybe it's not necessarily immediate reception, but it still helps because there's a lot of people who follow those Twitter accounts and pay attention to the new devices that are coming out. So I think it's a twofold situation. I agree with Alex, but at the same time, just again, having it on another North American carrier that isn't AT&T helps spread the word and helps possibly sell more devices, and that's only going to continue because as Verizon and Sprint essentially pick it up as well, and we're gonna see them have their little bit of marketing push as well to be able to go ahead and get the device sold. But as James mentioned, it's kind of a little bit of a scary territory because with Verizon running it so late, you kind of lose initial interest at that point in time. Like March, if we're talking March, if the rumors are to believe, Samsung is going to be able to go ahead and basically put a Samsung Galaxy S7 in people's hands come near mid-March, and that is pretty much the date that we have thus far from Verizon as to when the Priv will be available. If you wait that long, or if that scenario plays out exactly as it's rumored to, the Priv is essentially just going to be overshadowed by the Samsung Galaxy S7.
Yeah.
We all know how much weight Samsung puts into their marketing, right? So it's kind of a spooky scenario at that point.
Yeah. Which I think there's a lot of people who, they're on Samsung because they've always gotten Samsung. So I don't know. Like, yes, there are people who will just go to the store and be like, they'll be pushed to buy a Samsung. device, the Galaxy S7 or whatever, but I think at the same time, people who were planning on buying it probably had the 6 or the 5, and they're sticking with it regardless. At least Samsung, I feel like, is one of the manufacturers that have a lot of, I can't think of the word, but people like stick with it rather than just like jumping back and forth.
That sticky icky.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
That's a technical term.
Yeah.
You know, that device loyalty is something that I think BlackBerry is going to start having to really look at, because they have, you know, moved away from that core platform that they've been riding and what their customers have been using for some time. And now when you move to Android, there are so many other options. And Blaze kind of hit the nail on the head there when he's talking about these other Android devices that could come and potentially overshadow what Priv is and what Priv is trying to go for in that demographic. At the same point, I wonder if, for BlackBerry specifically, they're looking at this device in terms of, you know, BES software a little bit more than we perhaps think. You know, if this is strictly like going to be a device they're trying to push to some of their enterprise clients, is there a value of having a Priv versus, you know, what Samsung's already done with Samsung Knox with BlackBerry's help, right? It's like the line between these devices is really starting to blur as BlackBerry enters this space, and you know, it's a really tough sell as to whether or not this kind of hardware factor, the slider with the keyboard, big battery, etc., is really going to be something that has staying power in a market that is so like quick as it continues to evolve and advance. And Android is that place, right? It's really a congested area.
Yeah, and I think it always comes back. I think it always comes back to the keyboard, though. Like, I'm going into a business and being able to say, hey, you know, we have an Android device to use. It's like, oh, okay, great. Why would we go with your more expensive Android device and all this other stuff? Well, our Android device is a keyboard, and don't your sales, you know, your employees and everyone, they need to write emails and da-da-da-da-da. It's like a keyboard will help that. So I think the next phone that comes out too, whenever it ends up coming out, the fact that it's just like focusing really on the keyboard, that could be a big hit for specifically the enterprise grade, because it'll be a cheaper device and you're kind of getting that value proposition, which is the physical keyboard, and I think that would be a really good kind of thing. I'm interested to see how that goes, but I think it is a good enterprise play having their own device and their own kind of unique value proposition for it.
Yeah, I think it helps basically to be able to go ahead and sell people on those devices, because you can walk in there and say that you essentially have a solution for everyone, you know.
Yeah.
You know, even if they wanted, let's say for example they wanted BlackBerry 10 devices. Well, BlackBerry has no problem with providing them with BlackBerry 10 devices. Oh, your company is using iPhone? Great, it works with our systems no matter what. You know, we can set you up with either good technology, or we can set you up on a BES at that point. Same with Windows Phone. Like, if these companies are already invested into the iOS or Windows Phone platform, then, you know, BlackBerry has the software solution on that side.
Yeah.
And if, you know, even if it comes down to like, oh, they already have Android devices, that software solution is there as well. But it helps with the ability to be able to go ahead and sell them on an Android solution, because of the fact that BlackBerry can provide them with Privs. You know, even if they are, let's say for example they're already on a Samsung device and they're looking to upgrade that Samsung device, well, BlackBerry has a Priv available to be able to go ahead and at least offer it to them. They don't necessarily have to take it, but either way, the hardware is there. And again, that goes back to BlackBerry 10 as well, because we know that they're still pushing BlackBerry 10 in enterprise because it essentially is their most secure platform at this point in time, right? You know, it leaves a lot of opportunity for BlackBerry to be in that enterprise space more so than the consumer space, because, you know, as much as I hate to say it, they're getting kind of burnt out in the consumer space, especially, I don't know, it's kind of like all these things keep happening that cause the consumers to not essentially place their trust in BlackBerry. But that same level of trust doesn't necessarily transfer over to enterprise, because they're totally on a different spectrum, right? Like, these enterprise users and these enterprise offerings don't necessarily give two damns what the consumer market thinks, right? It's an interesting thing because they're burning out the consumer crowd by offering a Priv, and people are upset that they went Android, and maybe we've discussed this before about the whole BlackBerry 10 is dead and BlackBerry 10 is not dead scenario, where it comes down to the individual looking in on the situation, right? But they have all these enterprise offerings that essentially can go ahead and help them out, and it's really, if you sit back and you look at the situation, it's really a culmination of what they've done over the years. Like they acquire good, and people, I don't know if people noticed, but like we put up a blog post about Good hosting an app SDK webinar and basically explaining how that app SDK. Well, some people got upset that there was no BlackBerry logo shown off in the video. Well, they didn't necessarily acquire good technology for that BlackBerry aspect. They acquired good technology because of the fact that it already works with Android and it works with iOS. Like, the BlackBerry integration level there isn't necessarily a concern because BlackBerry literally bought a bunch of iOS and Android users with the purchase of good technology. Like, it's kind of crazy to think that, but that's exactly what they did. They bought a bunch of iOS and Android enterprise users just because they bought good technology.
And at the end of the day, they're buying those customers back in a lot of them, right? Where they had
went the long way around it.
Yeah. And as Chad said, they got a good deal on it, so why not, right? Integrate, take out one of your biggest competitors, seize the majority market share in your market demographic, and now you're starting to make VMware sweat, right? And all of that. So there's some strategy going on with Chen. He's making a lot of very strategic, long-looking decisions and really having some foresight here to approach BlackBerry from a perspective that they're going to be able to really leverage some of these assets into the future. You know, we talked a lot last podcast about some of the overlay between Good and BlackBerry's own homegrown system, but as Blaze said, there is an acquisition cost per user that you incur regardless, right? Whether you're trying to acquire a new customer or gain back an old. So in doing this, that's sunken cost now as part of that acquisition. And really, from what it's looking like on paper, it may be an acquisition, but moreover, it looks like a merger where they plan to have this kind of cohesive platform at the end of it when they can actually do a little bit of integration, where with AtHoc, more of a standalone subsidiary type business for them, where it has its own legs to stand on. And this seems to be more of a unification of an entire platform for them, or at least the start thereof, where, as Blaze said, they can talk and work and have customers on different playing fields. Kind of rolling back a little bit to the Samsung conversation we were having, it is entirely realistic for BlackBerry to need to have that kind of user in the enterprise, so that when their enterprise sales teams go out and make a sale, they can at least offer a BlackBerry product, right? Instead of having to offer, Bez with an iPhone or Bez with a Samsung, right? Now I can just try to slide a BlackBerry Priv in there, like literally slide it in there. So it's really just valuable for them to have a high-powered Android device that they can throw at that segment and really help them control the costs of what they're doing. By investing in Bez, they are also investing in the growth of that hardware business for them now. And they have a device that can actually meet that market. A lot of interesting stuff with where BlackBerry's headed there. We have the India launch coming, and really hope it does do well, specifically in that enterprise segment for them, because that's going to be huge, aside from the general consumers where, Blaze said there has been kind of a mistrust there. And it is interesting. I mean, we had this conversation a little bit ago on a couple upstreams, and we'll kind of swing back there as we go to our Patreon questions. We talked about $720 as the price for the T-Mobile Priv outright, and as well that launch will happen on Tuesday in about 2 days. But Blaze mentioned a really interesting point about consumers having a shaken faith in what BlackBerry has to deliver for them. And the Built for BlackBerry program was almost a symbolic badge of honor for that consumer market who's buying those applications from BlackBerry World on BlackBerry 10. Alex, as a developer who strives to achieve Built for BlackBerry on your own applications, how does it feel for you that the program is ending, and do you think it has a trickle effect to the perception and or the community as a whole?
I was a little bit sad to hear that, because that was something that I tried very hard to achieve, and then there were many times that my app actually got declined because of something so minuscule and tiny, like you have 3 action items in the swipe down menu and you could only have these 2 or whatever, like very kind of bizarre little tiny things that they were enforcing. So going through as much effort as that to get that kind of certification and them just kind of getting rid of it, it makes it feel like that this is kind of one of the final nails in the coffin in terms of they at least aren't going to be focusing very much of their efforts on internal app development because, I mean, obviously if you have a lot of developers kind of going crazy developing apps, like can you imagine a built for Android certification? That'd be great to have on Android because you have so many apps and you don't know what ones are good or what ones follow the UI paradigm or you don't, it's a great idea if you have a lot of people developing apps. So I think this is kind of showing them, well, app developers are slowing down a little bit, so really what is the point in having one of our departments spend this much effort going through each app, making sure that they're fitting what we want them to do? It just doesn't make sense at this point anymore, unfortunately.
How much investment was it, though? I mean, how many apps were coming in this late and 3 years later? I mean,
they definitely, initially when they released built for BlackBerry Certified. I mean, I think I was one of the first like 40 or 50 apps on the platform that was built for BlackBerry Certified. So they were literally downloading the app, going into the app, and checking like everything. Obviously, later in, it was kind of like if you knew somebody, if you knew a developer, and they kind of put your name out there, they would give you a little bit of leniency. And I think they started
to with the rules after a while.
Exactly. So I mean, at that point, it's like, well, what even is built for BlackBerry Certified? Because you'd get some kind of crappy apps that were actually built for BlackBerry Certified, and it actually made me feel a little bit sick when I saw that because it's like that doesn't make my everything that I did. It doesn't, it kind of, I don't know.
It a little bit, yeah.
Exactly.
It lowers the standard when you get like a subpar application.
I'm pretty sure like Blaze made a built for BlackBerry app, so
yeah, I mean they should have shut it down as soon as they gave me the built for BlackBerry app.
I think Brian in the back corner there got a built for BlackBerry.
Oh, dude, everyone did.
Here's a funny thing, like I think a built for BlackBerry app for BlackBerry should be measured by did you download our SDK to help build this?
Yeah.
If you invested time, it's a built for BlackBerry app. I get the certification. I don't think it necessarily needed to be a public we're turning back on this because it just creates this negative, push, and all the diehard blogs are posting about it, and this is the downfall of BB10 and all this other stuff that's just not accurate, right? This is a natural thing that wound up and then wound out, right? It's just a natural thing as part of how the OS is developed. So it just is a natural part of the progression of how this OS is being basically backburned at this point, right? So I really don't think people need to take it as a super, super negative thing that all BlackBerry 10 development has ceased. Developers are still putting out updates for applications in BlackBerry world.
But that's the thing. I mean, when you make a public announcement like that, the email went out to developers and it went up on the developer blog post, so you could kind of sort of get away with saying that it wasn't necessarily a public thing, but at the same time it was, right? And we've discussed this many times before. People take from the information what they really want to go ahead and see, whether or not the information is actual fact or not. Like reading through the Crackberry comments have there's 410 comments on there, and some people are like, "This is it. There's no more BlackBerry apps." Like, it doesn't mean that there's no more BlackBerry apps. Like, how did you even get that from the information? Like, I don't understand how you could derive that specific information from what was outlined in the post. Like, it doesn't say that they stopped building apps and that they're no longer accepting apps. It says that they're no longer reviewing them for BlackBerry or built for BlackBerry certification. It doesn't mean that everybody gave up and no longer has access to be able to update their apps or submit new apps or anything like that. It's kind of crazy that people take things that far. It's like, holy shit! Like, did you even bother to read it? Like, that's not what it says at all. Overall, in my opinion, I agree with everything that Alex said, but I think, maybe they probably shouldn't have made it as public. Just let the people know who still have the apps that were, in the queue to be reviewed, that they're no longer accepting them, and let it die off. It didn't necessarily need to be a public thing, because again, that's how people twist things. That's how it became something so huge. Like, at the end of the day, it's not really that big of a deal. They're no longer accepting built for BlackBerry applications, and the logos are going to disappear. That's what it breaks down to, really. I mean,
I will say this though, and Chad, maybe you can speak on this as well, because I know, at least as a buyer in BlackBerry world, that when I saw that badge, I definitely considered the application more. Like, it was a highly effective thing, at the time there. Chad, for you, was the BlackBerry built for BlackBerry certification of value in terms of like your buying decisions in BlackBerry world?
Majority of my apps that I had, C10 on my passport, were built for BlackBerry. I had a better feeling, I guess. It was nice to know that these apps were built for BlackBerry 10 or BlackBerry devices. They weren't ported over. They weren't from other platforms. These were apps that I enjoyed using. I wasn't really app heavy on my device. I was more on the email side, the integration, to more of a productivity of the device itself. But when it came to the apps, yeah, I would have to say that. It was nice to know I'm buying an app, or I'm paying for I'm contributing to a developer who spent time. Alex, you could, I give you a lot of props for spending all the time on your app development, and any of the developers, because you know what, you spend a lot of time to do that. You take the time to learn the code. You learn the ability to build those apps, and for me to see that built for BlackBerry, I don't mind contributing to that. So
yeah, I mean, there's built for BlackBerry apps that I bought that I had no intention on using them. I just bought them because of the fact that I wanted to go ahead and support the developer who was behind it, because of the time that they
what a baller.
put into it.
wish I could throw my pennies at these apps.
I mean, it's supporting BlackBerry too at the same time.
Yeah.
They're getting a 30% cut from each sale. So, I mean, whenever you buy an app, it's not just the developer.
But you know what? It was nice to know that the developer spent the time to actually submit their app. And that, for me, was like, I wanted to learn how to develop apps by seeing all these apps and seeing the build for BlackBerry. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should be an app developer.
What Chad is really saying is, damn, that Red Z10 is fire. That's what
Yeah.
he's really saying.
That's the Z10.
Actually, I like the black more.
Yeah. I really got into BlackBerry 10 development because I was so excited for BlackBerry 10, and they were giving out the developer alpha devices, and I had a buddy who was kind of like, hey, if you develop an app, I could try and talk to somebody, and I could be like, hey, he needs a BlackBerry 10 developer device because he's building an app. So I literally kind of built this. I learned app development. I was doing HTML5 development, and I created this kind of junky app at first, but they sent it over to BlackBerry, and they're like, okay, we'll send them over a device, and then I just fully dove into it from there. So it was kind of funny how that even worked. I was just being greedy and wanted a BlackBerry 10 device, and then turned into this thing where, getting built for BlackBerry certification was this thing I strived for, and it was so much work to do that really it didn't. I don't even know if it ended up paying off in terms of getting it, but it sucked me in.
And we tie into all of this as well, that Heinz and his whole regime at BlackBerry did so much to build up this platform. They really did, in terms of BlackBerry 10, where you can't harm them or harp on them for what they did accomplish, because they did accomplish a lot. Not only was there built for BlackBerry, there was a 10K developer commitment as well that developers built toward. So there was a lot of incentive out there: devices, swag with your points you could get, and of course that 10K commitment if you were obviously within there during that specific time period where they were running that program. There was a lot of incentive. So as Chad mentioned, bringing that built for BlackBerry certification did have a badge of meaning for BlackBerry 10 users, and I kind of am hurt that they're taking it away from users who work toward it, right? I think it should be something you just leave there, right? Maybe you don't support it, you don't take in new entries, but you leave those badges there. I know that it takes a continual process to kind of update and vet and make sure those apps are all still up to par. But definitely sad to see that program kind of wind down. I know something that really did have a big playing factor in my specific purchasings of apps. So as we wind down here toward the latter end of our podcast, probably the most interesting piece of news that came out this week is BlackBerry. This headline just gets me every time. BlackBerry takes starring role in Hollywood TV shows and movies. So, did any of you guys happen to read this article or actually go through it and digest the content? Because it's actually a very, very well-written article, but very poorly delivered, in my opinion only. So I wanted to get your take on it and whether you thought it was an effective piece of social media for them. I mean, yes, it's creating a conversation, but is it necessarily the kind of conversation BlackBerry wants? So did any of you guys happen to read through that piece specifically? Like, it shows BlackBerry devices being used in television shows and movies, and it also kind of teases toward the very end that, keep an eye out on, look out, maybe the new Android-powered Priv may make an appearance in Hollywood in 2016. Don't be surprised if you see a BlackBerry on the red carpet coming this February, which kind of lines up sort of as we're headed toward that Mobile World Congress time frame too. So a lot of interesting stuff put in that article talking about, dropping names, basically, talking movies and showing off those BlackBerries. What were some of your thoughts on that specific blog post that hit the Inside BlackBerry blogs?
It's weird because I'm thinking of a few things right now, and for instance, I've been watching Gotham lately, and it takes place in a very specific point in time. They have like the telephones that you pick up, and they have kind of the curly thing, and all the flip phones they use, the cell phones they use, they're flip phones. So when you go into a television, show or a movie, you have someone who's really trying to get the exact point in time that this is taking place in, and love it or hate it, BlackBerry was a big point in time. I think there was like a 10-year time span where you had a BlackBerry device because that was what existed. So if they're trying to portray, it's such a weird kind of scenario because I'm looking at one of the pictures and it's an old curve that they're using in it, and it's like obviously they have an old curve in there because that's what people were using at the point in time that they're trying to portray in the TV/movie. But obviously when you see the more current ones, I mean, I'm seeing Microsoft in there a lot, and it's kind of funny because like the average phone you see isn't Microsoft, but you obviously know, at least I know, that when I see a Microsoft device, Microsoft's probably paying them, decent amount of money to show it off in there. So I'm kind of at this point in time where I don't really care much. It doesn't make me want to buy a device because I see it in my favorite TV star show's hands. I wonder how much it does affect. I guess it's nice to see a BlackBerry device out in a TV or a movie, and it's kind of like, ooh, a BlackBerry device. That's literally the reaction I get, and then I just whatever after that. So I guess I don't know how much it helps, but it definitely doesn't hurt anything.
I'm a bit jaded to it all because of the fact that like people have been doing this for pretty much years now. Like we have a thread on Crackberry which is like berry spotting. Like it's people who watch videos and they capture the screen caps of BlackBerries, or celebrities holding BlackBerries, or showing off their BlackBerries, whatever the case may be. It's just berry spotting, right? And to me, that's cool. That's really cool that people actually have that much of an interest to it. But at the same time, I'm wondering, is, like Alex said, Microsoft presumably pays a lot of money for their placement. Like if you watch like The Flash or any of the like Marvel TV shows, Agent Carter or anything like that, there's usually some sort of association there at the end where it will say, promotional consideration paid for by Microsoft, or, devices provided by Microsoft. But I never actually see that on BlackBerry. So, for BlackBerry, sorry.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
I'm questioning whether or not these placements are actually coincidental, and, BlackBerry isn't actually providing any of this stuff, or they're not paying anybody for it. Or is BlackBerry actually paying these people to go ahead and show off these products? Like, when it comes to an older product, I would probably say no. Like, it's probably just a coincidental scenario where people have thought about it and they had these old dummy BlackBerry devices sitting around and, they just used them. However, that mention in that blog post about the Priv possibly appearing in newer shows makes me believe as though that BlackBerry may start essentially paying for some of these promotional spots. Like that's what really I took from the post. Like, because again, like I said, I'm a bit jaded because I've been seeing this stuff for years, right? That's what really got my interest.
Here's a quote directly from the blog post, and again, very well written because it hits you on like right in the right places to get that emotional kind of jive from you. But at the same point, it almost seems like as a fallacy the way it's written, because here's a quote under one of the photos: with all these roles on major TV shows and movies, it's no wonder BlackBerry doesn't follow the crowd and buy ad time between shows. So it's like it's placing a jab at like what the competition is doing by saying like we don't have to pay for product placement. People use us as period pieces. People use us to define a segment of time. But again, what they're also saying is you're defining a period of time that was 10 years ago,
Yeah.
with a lot of older devices being used. So it's this duality where they need to move the perception from the old devices to the new, and it ties right into what Blaze said in terms of maybe they are going to start actually spending money and doing some of these placements to revitalize what that perception is, because this is what people use BlackBerries on television for nowadays, is to show off military, law enforcement, medical, financial, lawyer type person at a time in life where BlackBerries were, that defining item, that defining electronic piece.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
No, sorry.
No.
Like look at House of Cards, for example. And the first season or so, you saw Blackberries in every single person who's in who's in the government, and it's like that was it made sense. And then all the people who were, just reporters and things, they had iPhones, and it's like, okay, this feels right. And then it's like season 2, season 3, you just see everyone has a Microsoft Windows device. It's like, wait a minute, this is like it's almost funny how it's like, this doesn't feel right, but I know why you're doing this. So it's almost like Microsoft is almost paying simply just so Blackberries are taken out of people's hands, more so than it is to get iPhones and Blackberries out of people's hands, more so than it is putting Windows devices in people's hands. But that perception, like what James was saying.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to touch on the same thing and exactly what Alex said. House of Cards, for example, and then you have Tim Allen using the passport, but it's also nice seeing in this blog post that Amy Poehler was holding a passport as well. You have the older devices being displayed as much as they can, because that's how we recognize BlackBerry. The one that's showing that 8700 with the track wheel, I miss those devices. The track wheel is phenomenal. But you know what? It's nice seeing the upgraded devices where you have the passport. And for them to say the Priv is going to be displayed in 2016, I'm actually looking forward to it. And like you all said, it's product placement. You don't have to spend that additional money on the marketing. But maybe they should put in a little TV ad right in between the commercials or invest into Hulu, Netflix, or whatever it is. That way they could just try to get a little bit more into it.
And you bring up
right on the head.
Yeah. You bring up a good point too, because I'm kind of wondering, like, if they do kind of put it in a TV show or something, are they gonna make it obvious, like the guy, instead of just like using it like this, are they gonna like show him slide it up and then start? And then that might get some people to be like, wait, what just happened? And they might be like, well, what is that thing? And that's where you need the commercial afterwards. Exactly what Chad said, to be like BlackBerry Priv, and they could go like that over and over and over and be like, oh, that's what they were using. I want that.
Partner with the carriers. You know what? AT&T has a carrier commercial of the device. And then with T-Mobile coming on board, and then down the road, whenever Verizon starts to display their devices, maybe they should get involved. That way it's not just BlackBerry spending the money on the marketing, but you're also partnering with the carriers, which they do with any other device, so why can't they do it with BlackBerry?
It's really, they got to be able to prove that market so that they can get these carriers enticed. Like when BlackBerry 10 came out, Heinz and Crew did a great job. We saw that same Keep Moving ad with different carrier badges at the end. Problem was that ad wasn't effective, right? It was a good idea, poorly executed.
Great song.
Yeah, great song, right? But it just didn't show you enough of the phone. It showed me a lot of like the moving, and how people were keeping at it. But it didn't, again, hit to the level that it educated anyone as to what BlackBerry was really doing. It got them interested to maybe go look online and learn more. But today, people want that instant gratification. I want to know what this thing is, and I want to know it now, right? You got 15 seconds of my attention, let alone my time. So it's interesting to see a blog post like this. Before we were on air, I was kind of making a snide remark that, if you have to write a blog post about your product placement, you're probably not doing it right, where you have to glamorize this yourself because it's not being told enough, or are you getting this kind of feedback from users like, hey, we've seen a BlackBerry here, we've seen a BlackBerry here, and you're kind of consolidating it for your own purposes. Regardless, a very interesting blog post. And again, names are dropped throughout about who was using a BlackBerry device, in what show, in what movie, and that they can plan to, kind of continue doing this. I've definitely seen James Bond movies and hated the fact that Sony phones are always used when James Bond seems like a BlackBerry type of user, like in almost every way. So it just makes you kind of wonder, are there other opportunities for them to leverage BlackBerry in a smart way on other types of media that, again, are kind of break from the standard traditional, right, where maybe a 15-second ad in between shows is less effective than just having it built in and showing the kind of power users that are going to draw people to the brand. Definitely a very interesting kind of piece from BlackBerry. Chad's taking a wine break. I must have got him thirsty on my end. But
it makes me excited to actually you know, like I said previously, like I'm a bit jaded to it because it's not really news to see a phone in a TV show. But with them mentioning that, you know, the Priv may start appearing in new shows, it actually makes me excited to actually go ahead and spot a Priv. Like that excitement level has been increased because of the fact that they may actually start doing something with it, and that would be exciting. Like I want to see that. Like I want to see what they're going to do with it if, you know, again, assuming they are going to do anything in that regard.
It's an interesting world. It really is, because, you know, honestly, like I have a cable box, but I don't use it, right? I'm
Yeah.
all on Hulu. I'm all on, you know, Amazon Prime Video. I'm all on Netflix. So, you know, Hulu, you put on a TV show and it's like, which ad would you like? You know, like, give me 3 Priv ads and I'll choose from those. Like,
Didn't
that's
they have
where
C10?
effective marketing. Yeah, they
Did the C10 commercials on Hulu when they came out?
I saw a couple there, and they were all carrier driven too, which was kind of cool. But again, it's like that's the kind of stuff I want them to get back to, because we are in such a social society now that we're using these streaming and all these, you know, very viral types of you know, media consumption outlets, and that's where BlackBerry needs to put their money, right? Like not necessarily on TV, where you have the live.
I want to see it on YouTube, like in video, because you know, like this episode brought to you by Squarespace, and a lot of the times they'll do like, you know, Techno Buffalo does it all the time too. But they try and make it more interesting, where it's not like, you know, buy this headset. It's like they'll do this whole kind of B-roll and like show it off, and maybe do a little comedy skit along with it, and not feel like you're watching an ad per se.
Yeah.
So it's like, if they did that, like, I mean, I spend a lot of my time watching YouTube, and I know the general market doesn't necessarily, but there are a lot of people like me that do watch YouTube over television. And when I do watch television, it's normally Netflix, and you don't get any ads through that. So it would be nice to see them at least on YouTube partnering up with some bigger names, people, you know, thought leaders that actually push, you know, oh, I want to be like, I don't know, I can't even think of a famous YouTube person, but I want to be like them, and they're recommending me to buy a BlackBerry, so I should buy that, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, it can't really be like a pop-up ad or anything like that. It has to be
People hate that
integrated ad,
now.
because people, you know,
They block it.
yeah, let's be realistic. People use ad blockers on YouTube and stuff like that, so they don't see it. You know that.
Well, he's
that
just
kind
an
of
ad
marketing-
blocker aficionado. He's blocking all them ads.
Yeah, that kind of scenario. You know, you're at that point in time, for those who do it, you know, you're kind of wasting your money. But, you know, BlackBerry has $20 million from AtHoc now. Maybe put that towards some advertising.
Yeah, I got money in the bag. No, it's funny because, like, you know, honestly, if they can get to a point where the handset business is, one, self-sufficient, meaning it runs itself in terms of the financials, right? And then they could get a little bit more on top of that. Because they've got the core business locked down, they're going to be able to take that overhead and then invest in whatever they want, right? They don't necessarily need to put their hardware revenues in the bank, right? But now that gives them investable money that they can do advertising with, they can do R&D and more development and other things with, right, to keep the ball rolling. So it is an exciting place, you know. Android is a means to an end at this point. So BlackBerry 10 users, keep using what you love. It still works. It's not like it's self-destructed from your phone and totally invalidated the money you invested in it, right? When you buy a product, you buy it for what it is when you buy it, not the potential it may have in the future years down the line, right? I bought Priv with Lollipop because that's what it's shipped with, right? I didn't buy it with the full intention of, you know, the chance and hope that it'll come to Marshmallow. Yeah, BlackBerry's promised it for us, but that's not what it's about, right? You buy a product and that's what you get. So with BlackBerry 10, consider you have Blend, you've got all these other facets and services that are really built in. And there's really a lot of potential there for BlackBerry to continue to expand themselves and their demographics. So I hope they continue trying to reach a larger audience, and if product placement is something they seem viable and cost-effective for them, kudos to them for doing it.
That's
I want
why
to transition.
recommending BlackBerry 10 devices. People keep asking me, should I buy a Priv? Should I buy a BlackBerry 10 device? Is BlackBerry
do you,
10
bro.
safe to
Do
buy?
you.
Right?
Buy the Priv, though.
Buy both.
I get that question all the time. Like,
Yeah.
which device should I go? I'm tired of using iPhone, or I'm tired of using Windows. Which device should I go? I like the keyboard. Well, have you tried Android? Have you tried BB10? What works for you? What is it that you really need out of the device?
I honestly want people to pick up the Priv and then pick up BB10. Like, I honestly want people to fall in love with, like, what Priv is doing and then realize that, like, everything that they've actually really, really love about the Priv is better on BlackBerry 10 in almost every single way. And no, I say this, but it's like it's one of those forlorn hopes that's probably not worth having. But I really hope that Priv and Android becomes a dual OS strategy, and really long term that doesn't seem like a viable thing for them unless Android really is a hit for them. And we really have no inclination as to whether that is the case. But I really think there is a synergy that can happen between the two, where users maybe migrate to the Android version and say, you know what, I want more security, I want more better productivity, and there's a pathway to BlackBerry 10 in the future, which is going to continue getting updates throughout this year. We don't know what the future tech necessarily holds with BlackBerry 10, whether it's something they're totally transitioning away from or whether they're going to stick on the path they're going, right? Everything seems to lead toward Android being the long-term future for them, but we really don't know where their head is at in terms of what they want to develop, especially when they invested millions and millions on BlackBerry 10. Is it write it off time or find another use for it time? And I wonder what BlackBerry may be able to leverage it too if they want to continue utilizing those assets, which, as Blaze mentioned earlier, the Astonishing Tribe, J-Cut, all these acquisitions and money spent to build to that point. Seems kind of interesting to just push it all aside for a quick, easy way out. I want to transition to our Patreon questions. We have some very interesting ones today. Some of them are directed specifically at you, Blaze, and Crackberry. So this one is regarding, because we all own a Priv here, so it's kind of a good opportunity for us to answer this. Have any of the team experienced the shoddy build quality on the Priv? Example, clicky screen and other hardware issues. I'll be getting my 4th brand new Priv. Each one before it has had issues with a loose screen.
Oh,
So
wow.
you guys want to touch on that bit there?
I still have my original launch day Priv, and it's perfectly fine. Like, it had like a little bit of a creaky back to it, like when it's cold outside or something like that. But even that's not really bothersome. I've never had any of the screen click or anything. But also, there, you run into the problem of what people consider, clicky and what people consider creaky as well. Because at the end of the day, you still have to take into account that it is a slider, and it's not necessarily built like any other device. My Torch 9800 way back in the day had a little bit of a screen wobble too, but that could be attributed to it just being a slider. I think personally that maybe some people are a little bit too hard in terms of the build quality, and maybe they're a little bit too picky in that situation. Maybe you have to compensate for the fact that you did buy a slider. Parts do move.
Yeah.
And it's not a slab device that is meant to not really move or anything like that. Now,
The more you do this, it's going to break.
Yeah, exactly. That's the situation. And I don't want people to misconstrue that as I'm saying like there's no quality problems with it. I'm sure there are variations in the level of quality of the device that has been put out. But again, that's a scenario that happens across every single device. If you're on your 4th or 5th, maybe even your 6th one, maybe you want to slack off and consider your level of pickiness at that point in
So
time.
yeah, I really want to jump in on this because I was someone who was very picky when I first get it. I got 2 devices initially, one for my stepdad, one for me, and I felt like his worked a little bit better than mine. And I was like, whatever, not a big deal. I was excited to have the phone, and then when I got 4 more, I noticed like, hey, the one I'm setting up for my mom, this one's perfect, and the one I'm setting up for my stepbrother, it's a little bit jiggly. So the fact that I literally had 6 of them to play with, I got to really be like, well, there's actually this one's better than this one by a little bit, and this and this and this. So I started to obsess over it, and then like I went in and got mine replaced. Because I was also having like a speaker issue, and then finally I got the replacement, and it was great. But then it was kind of having a speaker issue, whatever was going on with it, and then I was like, it finally hit me. I was like, you know what? I need to stop thinking about it, and I won't care anymore. So I've
If you're
stopped
looking
giving
for
it.
it, yeah.
Yes, if you're looking for it and you're like, wow, it's flexing, or wow, the screen is going back and forth, then you're gonna go nuts. But like, as long as you just realize it's a phone, and in a year and a half from now, you're gonna probably have a new phone or whatever's going on, and like, if you use the phone like a phone, you don't even notice it. It's only when you're trying to like, stare at it and just do random things that's where you start stressing over it. But like, do you do that with your phone? No. Use your phone like a phone, and you won't care. That's what I've learned.
In my case, one of the reasons why I left my passport, I went through 3 devices because of the screen lifting issue. Me personally, the Priv, much better built. I'm still on my original device that I got from AT&T. I'm enjoying it. I'm loving it. I don't feel the clicking on the screen. I don't feel any loose parts from swiping the keyboard up and down. I feel this is a better build quality than the Passport itself. But you know what? I was just fortunate to go through that many screen lifting issues with the Passport.
Yeah.
James didn't have any. There was a few other members from BerryFlow who had Passport that didn't have any issues with it. I didn't pocket it. I holstered it. I had the Sadeo case for it. I protected that Passport because I wanted to make sure that thing lasted for the time that I needed it. But within a year, and I've gone through 3 devices, there was an issue. I knew there was an issue because something was wrong with the device. But then it came to a point where, like Alex said, you're obsessing over it, and I was looking for it. I was continuing to look for it. I would actually go in a room, make sure the lights were off, light up the screen, make sure that there's nothing issues with the screen. When I first got the Priv, I did that. A week later, I did it, and I'm like, you know what am I doing? The quality is built really well. What's the point? Why should I obsess over this? It is what it is. In a year, 2 years, whatever the time frame is, yeah, we're going to probably get a new device. Anything can happen. I have a 5-year-old and a 10-month-old. It's going to get spilled on. It's going to be dropped. It's going to be whatever the case is. Things happen. And if you obsess over it, you're going to make it worse for yourself.
Yeah.
One of our patrons asked that question, and another one of our patrons responded with an actual video fix for him. So this is really interesting. If you guys are experiencing any clicky screens, and specifically what we're talking about here is on the bottom corner, if you tap, you should have a very solid sound. It shouldn't sound very clicky or plastic and metal bouncing against one another. There's a video fix if you YouTube search for Passport screen clicking issue. Basically, the solution is to apply pressure to basically change the slide so that it fits more evenly with the device. So it's applying pressure to the opposite side at the top of where you're having your screen click. Doing this, it's a one-time fix. You realign the phone a little bit, and it's good to go. And again, as Alex says, there is a little bit of play back and forth. It's on a moving mechanism. You know, it's not totally locked in. Once you get it to fit perfectly within the grooves, it may take a little bit of tiny fraction of bending. You're very likely going to be able to get it where it needs to be. So
I don't want to undermine James in his recommendation because I know he's just making a note, but I wholly do not recommend that.
Yeah.
The reason
you don't want to go bending on your phone.
The reason being is because it's not really a solution. It is a temporary fix, and chances are you're flexing it back in the reverse way of which it is flexing. The more you do it, the more loose it's going to get over time. Do not do it. In my personal opinion, do not do it.
Remember the days with the Storm where you have to actually bend it a little bit or unscrew the screws or
put some dimes in
or whatever it is?
There are always solutions. You got to think about what's going to be best for you. If you want to send your device back in 4 or 5 times and you can deal without being with the device, maybe that's the best way to go.
And that's why BlackBerry has that protection plan.
Yep, $5 a month for Priv.
Well, that and they want to make money. I'm just saying.
So we had another question from Rob. Any Crackberry forum threads or topics that you find particularly interesting, informative, or infuriating? I often find all of the above. Would love to hear your views. So we'll let Blaze champion that one.
Well, there's
interesting, informative, or infuriating. I find all of these.
Talking about the forums or the blogs?
The forums.
The forums itself. I mean, the forums are always interesting because it's like a dumping ground for people's opinions, and that's the thing. And as I mentioned before, when people read things, they always take whatever they want out of it, and they roll with it. I mean, whether it's right or whether it's wrong, nobody can actually argue that point to make the other person be fully convinced about it. But I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, the forums are the forums, and everybody has their own opinions. But to directly answer the question, there's a lot of stuff that comes up in the forums that's absolutely interesting. Like when the last BlackBerry OS BlackBerry 10 OS went out, as we have discussed in previous podcasts, there's an issue with the Android runtime in there, and anybody who has visited the forums or used the Android solution at that point knows Cobalt's solution for downloading the Android apps using the Google Play Store. He actually did a complete analysis of what was going wrong with the Android runtime in that situation, where he figured out that there was like a security APK that was missing from the actual OS that was, causing problems with the Android runtime. So, I mean, in that situation, there's that's really interesting that the community itself can go ahead, take those problems, find out what the situation is, and go ahead and share it with other people so that they know exactly what's going on. Because, I mean, we all have different levels of technical expertise to be able to go ahead and pull that sort of information, but to be able to go ahead and take that information and share it with others, it's absolutely amazing that somebody could figure that information out, because I always find that impressive. People who go above and beyond to be able to go ahead and find out the problems behind the situation, and to be able to go ahead and share it with other people. When it comes down to it, the forums are the forums. Not everybody is going to agree, and I totally agree with the situation. Like, yeah, you're gonna find things that infuriate you. You're gonna find things that absolutely amaze you. You're gonna find people who you love to read their posts from, and other people who you absolutely hate. I mean, we're all different in the world.
Yeah. No, that's something I want to bring up. There's the thread, I support BlackBerry, I buy shares. I know that this is like it goes down in the records for being like whatever. Yes, it's informative, it's interesting, and it is very infuriating. Like when it's on topic, it's informative and interesting, and then when it's off topic, it's infuriating. So the solution that I've managed to find is like this guy Morgan Plus 8. He's very good with the stock market, and he always gives informative posts, and I'm literally subscribed to him, so whenever he posts, it notifies me, and I read his posts, and then I'll read a couple posts before and after it to get some context on it. Yes, I don't go there every day and read everything that's going on, but I'm interested in what's going on with the BlackBerry stock. I will go and read some of his posts and see what he has to say, and I've learned a decent amount about the stock market in general from that. So I guess that goes a step further than just BlackBerry, but the forums are definitely a great place. If I'm searching something on Google, a very bizarre issue or something happening, the forums oftentimes pop up, and I'll be able to see fixes that people recommend. I think it's more of it's there when you need it, and if you don't need it, feel free to just be around there to be entertained. But I've kind of gotten to the point now where I really just go there when I need some help with something, or if I'm interested in what's going on with stocks. Everyone uses it differently. It's a huge place.
Chad just loves selling his devices there.
Yeah.
You know what? To be honest, I had not sold one device off of Crackberry. The only thing I really sold on Crackberry was like my logos that I had made. But honestly, like, you know what? I've been with Crackberry, a registered user, I don't know, since 2006, I think it was. It's changed.
10 years, bro.
Yeah. It's changed over the years, and yes, it can be frustrating. Yes, it can be informative. Yes, you have to go through page after page after page to find something that's actually useful on there. But you know what? It's nice to still see it going, and when those who do post useful, informative information, it's great. But then you have to go through all this BS to get to it. That's the thing that frustrates me, where when I go on there, personally, I just read the blogs. When it comes time to like research something, yeah, then I'll go to the forums. Or if I'm middle of the night and I can't sleep, then yeah, I'll go through the unanswered threads and figure out what's going on. But honestly,
it works the reverse for Blaze. He reads the forums and they can't sleep.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's days that I absolutely love hanging out in the forums and answering questions. Like anybody who really knows me knows that I take part in the forums. Like
yeah,
if you want to ask any sort of questions directly to me, you might as well not even email me. Like if you really want to ask a question, go ahead and post it in the forums, because chances are I'm browsing the forums and you'll get a quicker answer there than anywhere else, right? And I mean, I have tons of posts. I mean, it literally, the forums is how I got my job with Crackberry, because I just posted so damn much. I caught Kevin's attention, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to come work for us?" I'm like, "Okay." That's how I managed to actually go ahead and start working for Crackberry, was just the sheer amount of posts that I made in the forums. But some days I look at the forums and I'm like, yeah, no, can't do that today. And then there's other days that I just totally dive right into it and totally absorb all of the information and stuff. And one of the I guess I don't want to sound like like it's a bragging or anything like that, but one of the problems with Crackberry and essentially the forums is that it is so big. It draws so many members. Like, there's over 4 million registered members. And compared to like some other smaller forums, it becomes increasingly harder to find the information that you're looking for when you have so many users at that point in time, and everybody sharing their opinions and thoughts and scenarios and problems and so on and so forth. Like, you can't be big and totally separate all of the fluff. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that. When you have so many users at that point in time, like, it becomes incredibly hard. And our moderation team works to be able to go ahead and clear up as much stuff and as much junk as what they can. But at the same time, our moderation team all have real lives too. Like, we don't have like a dedicated moderation team that's like paid or anything like that. Like, they all dedicate their own personal time to be able to go ahead and clean up that stuff. So yeah, I mean, one of the symptoms with the forums is the fact that it's so huge and everybody wants to have their own say. And, like we mentioned, it becomes problematic because it becomes an emotional roller coaster, because you can find things that are absolutely amazing. You can find things that totally infuriate you and make you want to throw your mouse at the screen and whatever, right? It's really interesting.
Rip out the trackpad.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the forums because there's always an answer, right? I've never not found an answer to something I've been looking for. It may not be like a viable answer, but there's always an answer. Where at least it's just like peaceful to at least like, okay, someone else had the same question, or someone else had the same issue or the same concern or the same user error that I did, right? And it's always just good to see that, again, a sense of pulse and community that still is out there with the conversation and dialogue that continues to keep happening. So that's always positive to see. Our last bit of patron question here is I'll read it out full. Thanks for the awesome answers last time, guys. If BlackBerry had gone private, as was rumored around the time Chen took over, what do we think would be different? This is a pretty interesting question. If BlackBerry had gone the privatization route that they initially wanted, instead of the $1 billion basically investment that went in from Prem Watsa instead, how do you think privatization versus staying as a public traded company, how do you think that would differentiate the company or have affected them?
Well, I would be using this.
That's part of it. I don't, in terms of the device side and things like that, I'm not entirely too sure. But I have thought about it a lot about whether or not going private would have been the right scenario. And as I said many times before, I'm not great with the stock market. I don't know what that would have done. I don't know what it would have done to the device side of things. However, I most definitely know that if they had have gone private, there would be less scrutiny upon them at this point in time. You would not be reading all of those, BlackBerry is dead blog posts. You would not, have people ultimately chasing the stock price, whether or not it's going up or down, and sharing negative opinions based on that information. You wouldn't have any of that. The company would simply exist, and they would just basically give out details whenever they wanted to go ahead and give out details. A lot of the negativity surrounding BlackBerry, I personally believe, would have disappeared had they have gone private. Again, I don't know what that means on the device side or stock side or anything like that, but
oh my God, they did go private or private. They went private.
Oh, wow. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of negativity and a lot of negative sentiment would have been, wiped off the board at that point in time because there wouldn't have been so much information that people could actually shine a bad light on.
I don't know. At this point, I almost feel like the bad news has kept them alive. Like, would we talk about them otherwise? Like, would we celebrate their victories on a mass media scale?
It's a fair
Probably not.
argument.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, privatization. You basically out of sight, out of mind, and I honestly think that's probably why they didn't, and probably found it more fiduciary responsible to, instead of spending $4 billion, to spend the $1 and keep playing ball, right? Keep that brand up, because the BlackBerry brand has value. It's one of those things that I really think is gonna. It's touched so many, age groups and generations, especially millennials. Like, that might have been their first smartphone. Like, I think it's one of those things that is going to have a lot of staying power in this market for years to come, whether they build devices or not. That BlackBerry name is just it has that mental note, which is pretty interesting. I agree. I'm with Blaze in terms of how I feel about privatization. When the talks were happening, I was very excited for them to go private. I thought that's gonna get them out so that they can do what they got to do. But John Chen's done what they got to do, and they've done it publicly, right? And we've kind of ridden the wave of the stocks, but really we've just seen kind of a solid increase. It has been up and down here and there, but it's at least been increasing in value since those days where it was at, I think, 622 at a very, very, very low point in like.
Hey,
August.
we're not far from there now, but we also had a big market crash, so.
It's one of those things that I think for them to recover, having stayed a public company will mean more from a business case study perspective years to come than, they went private, killed their lambs in the back and no one saw and then came back a new company, right? They've migrated this transition in a very public way and done so with a lot of, I think, class, honestly. I respect the fact that John Chen's acknowledged the issues, confronted them face on, and has kept this company going. We have a Priv for those very reasons, right? Where they didn't give up and just secede from the market.
Yeah, and I think it'd also be kind of dangerous too, where it's like, say that they did go private and then they kind of fixed their problems, would they like go public like after that? And that'd be a little bit bizarre, a company going private then public again, and that might just create too much, weirdness. And it's like, so whenever you feel like you're not doing very well, there's gonna be a buyout and you're gonna go private again. Like, it just seems like a really weird way to be running a billion-dollar or multi-billion-dollar company. I think it's
better than not paying your taxes, I guess.
Yeah.
UK got them for that. Talk about privacy. So the final question that we had here was, the BlackBerry blogs have increased their ante a lot. Fact checker, relevant articles. What do you see as BlackBerry's current advertising strategy, and is it effective? Some haven't been too happy about the fonts/pictures on their new website design. And Alex is a web design guru, if you didn't know. Web design cheat sheet in BlackBerry World, check it out. But it's one of those things. Their marketing's been definitely upped in ante is a very good way to describe it. Not necessarily quality, but more of it is better than none of it, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
I'd rather have something than nothing, so more is always better than nothing, which is what we had there for a little bit, which is nothing to go off of. Specifically, if you're asking me if the blog articles can be considered as advertising, I guess we have to, right? Because again, there's not much to go off of otherwise. What do you guys think about the current blog strategy? There's a lot of people profiles now that they're linking back to, a lot of kind of user case study type things where, here's why I use X device, here's how it makes me productive. A lot of application features, as if telling us Android Priv runs Android apps is a very valuable thing to tell us. It's kind of a mixed bag. It's a little bit more focused than what it previously was in the past. What are some of your thoughts? Do you guys frequent the BlackBerry blogs for either developer, inside, or business?
I read through them every now and then, especially when there's like news information that comes up. But if you're asking me whether or not I read those people profiles, I honestly don't, because I skim through them enough to be able to go ahead and get the gist of the situation and what they're telling people, but I don't actually sit down and read through it every single day. And I really do really do question the amount of people that actually end up reading the blogs. Like, how far-reaching is the BlackBerry Inside blogs outside of our little bubble? Like, do other people actually read it, or are only the hardcore fans actually reading that? Because if the numbers show that it's only the hardcore fans that are reading it, then I don't necessarily think that it serves the audience very well. It needs to expand beyond that, because you should be pushing your messages to places where it has never been, rather than pushing the same message to the people who already know what the story that you're trying to tell. It's just kind of weird. Like, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it has become more lively in terms of what they're telling people and going on, and letting people know that these Android apps are available and such. Again, I don't know how far-reaching it is. It's almost better if they would like go ahead and put that information somewhere else, like pay to put it somewhere else.
And it's weird that like you're telling me Android apps work on the Priv. It's like, whoa, I had no idea. Like,
Yeah.
none. Like, mind blowing. Thank you for that, BlackBerry.
And it goes back to the scenario, like, you're kind of like angering some people as well, because I know from pushing stuff on Crackberry, like Priv articles, like people are genuinely getting tired of seeing Priv articles. Like the BlackBerry 10 hardcore fans are genuinely tired of seeing Priv articles and the help and how-tos and stuff like that. But that is stuff that needs to be done. Like, it needs to be out there, and people need to know about it. And whether or not everybody enjoys it, that's the content that is available to us now. I'm not going to go back and write a bunch of BlackBerry 10 articles, because it just doesn't make sense. Like, there's no BlackBerry 10 news or articles that haven't already been covered. Like, and when it comes to the Inside BlackBerry blogs, it seems like they're running into the actual same scenario, because they're telling people that Android apps work on Android. Well, of course they do.
I mean, it's sad, because like if you look at the ground they've had to cover in terms of covering Android, like that is something they probably have to do, because people don't necessarily associate BlackBerry with Android yet, even though it's been such a intrinsic part of BlackBerry 10, and literally the last 3 or 4 years it's been, even with Playbook, so it's literally been part of the conversation for some time. But the fact that BlackBerry even has an Android device is something that still needs to be told, in my opinion. So
I agree.
It's really an interesting conversation, and I want to pick up on more of it in the after show, which we're going to be doing. Again, this show is sponsored by viewers just like you, supporting us on Patreon. And we are actually, I have orders for the shirts are all coming in this week. They're coming in literally tomorrow, so I get to pick those up. And as well, I've ordered some specialized stickers, and we've already got the buttons, and those packages will be going out to you guys literally as February hits. We'll be getting them out there for you guys. So thank you, everyone, for your continued support. We're going to hop on the after show, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that Hollywood article, because VentureBeat and a couple other places definitely went ham on that article, which is pretty, and they make great points at the same time. So dreidel, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Later.
Alex took that one to heart, I know.